the second season of OBAP's Hangar Talks. I am Shania Marshall, aka the OG Pretty Pink Pilot, and I am here with my co-host, the one and only
Kitty T, Kilo Tango, One Fly Noob. It's your boy, KT.
Yes. Today's focus is on diversity in aviation and aerospace with a special spotlight on the military sector. And today we have actually an amazing guest.
Yeah, we do. We got Major General Crumbly Deuce.
That's right.
He is the first African-American wing commander and commander of the Georgia Air National Guard.
First African-American 116th.
116th, there we go.
Air Control Wing Commander and commander of Georgia Air National Guard. And first of all, thank you all for having me. I'm overjoyed to be here.
It's great to have you. So, General Crumbly, he's command pilot on the J-Stars with over 3,500 hours of flying, including 1,300 hours of combat flying. And I flew in combat with him too. So
how was that?
Yeah. We made it back.
Right. We made it back.
We made it back. Yeah.
We did it. So he's flown in combat and support of Operation Racket Freedom, Enduring Freedom, and as well as support for missions in South Africa. And last year, well, we talked about he's named the first Black Air National Guard commander in the Georgia Air National Guard.
How does that feel to be the first?
So I'm going to tell you it's pretty cool. And actually, like all things in my life at this level, I have to make a disclaimer that all the views that I'm about to espouse are mine and mine alone, and not the views of the Georgia Air National Guard or Georgia Department of Defense. Pause. Now that we got that out the way. So one thing it was, and I have to kind of be stickler for things like this, right? So the other missions were in support of AFRICOM, not South Africa.
Okay.
Because somebody be like, well, what were you doing over South Africa, General Crumbly? I'm like, what? So, but to answer your question, to be quite honest with you, when you're going through these things and you're the first of something, you're typically pushing so hard that someone had to tell me that I was the first African-American wing commander, right? Because when you're doing your work, and then there's a wall with all the wing commanders on it, right? Previous wing commanders. So, I had never paid it any attention before, so it's probably my fault, right? So of the hundreds of times I'd been in that building for meetings, I'd never paid it any attention. Then I walked past it and was like, oh, okay, I am the first. But after you get that realization, nothing in your life changes, right? I mean, you still have to do the same work. You still have to, earn it every day like everyone else. So it's kind of like a thing where you're like, okay, that's cool. But at least for me, it's just one of those things where I'm like, well, hopefully someone else can see this. They can see that there's an unobstructed path to where I sit because I made it here. But for me personally, I'm just like, okay. And then I keep moving, because the job doesn't care whether but the jet does not care whether you had a good day, bad day, black, white. The jet doesn't care, right? So that's just kind of how I treat my job.
No, for sure. So let's go back.
Okay.
Back in time, real quick.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Back when I had hair.
Yes.
That's what this is. Right. Yeah. That's what this is feeling like. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. So tell us where it started and kind of share the journey through.
So I grew up in a small town, Fort Valley, Georgia. It's about 90 miles south of here. Both of my parents are instructors there. My dad's a scientist and my mom's an English teacher. Wow. So as a little kid, though, I've always had a fascination with airplanes. I don't have a memory where I wasn't fascinated with airplanes. So for some people, they get it later on in life. But for me, if you would look at pictures of my old room in the 70s and 80s, you would see dinosaurs, airplanes, and trains. That's still my thing, to be honest with you. So I really became infatuated with them when I started going to the library and I could get real books. And they had this competition at Thomas Public Library where if you read a lot of books, you could get a bronze medal or a silver medal or a gold medal, right? And I have an older brother that's 3 years older than me, and we are hyper competitive. So we would ask to be dropped off at the library, and this is when you had to check books out, and then
had to get the public.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
What's
right. It was actually you just wrote your name down and had a date on there and you gave it to him, and then you probably don't know what the Dewey you don't know what the Dewey Decimal System is. But anyway, never mind. That's how you found your books. Long story short, I would read these books, and the books only deepened my fascination with aviation. And then when I was 17, I turned 17. There was an ad in the paper, which I know, like, once again,
Paper.
Back into
paper,
time.
right? That's right. And they were asking for a line worker at the Perry Fort Valley Airport. So I was like, oh, that's right up my alley, right? And so I went out there to apply for this job. When I walked into the FBO and the room was about this size, and I said, hey, I'm here. I had the little ad in my hand, right? And I'm like, hey, I'm here to apply for the job. And they laughed at me. They didn't laugh at me like I told a joke. They laughed at me like they were like insulted
That you would come and ask
that
for
I
the
would
job.
come and ask for the job, right? And I knew what was going on. And I'm like, hey man, like I'm here to apply for the job. And they were like, you're not what we're looking for. And so I was crushed. And I went home and I talked to my mom and dad, and they were like, now my mama is from Mississippi and my father's from Arkansas. So, I tell them my story and they're like, and that's what I was getting. So I knew something was wrong with my story, right?
You're like, hold up, something won't sound right.
Something is wrong. And then my mother and father looked up at me and they said, well, you tell you what, you go back down there and you tell them you're going to pick up trash, be a janitor. And of course I was like, who are you talking to? I'm not.
Me?
Well, right.
Not me.
I'm going to do what?
I'm not doing that. And my dad looked me square in my face and said, well, who wants to fly those airplanes? You or them?
There we go.
So I was like, whatever. I'm not going down there and doing that. Go to high school the next day. But in my mind, it's like I hear my dad's voice. Who wants to do that? Right. So in the school, I go back down to Perry and I said, hey, listen, I know you all told me I couldn't get that job, but do you mind if I'm a janitor? I clean up and wash airplanes and that kind of stuff. And they're like, well, yeah, you can do that. So, I feel kind of like ashamed or whatever. And I'm filling out this paperwork and I see that all employees of this aviation company get a 20% discount on flight lessons.
Hello.
But see, if I had been stubborn and let my pride get in the way, right? And pride is useful, but sometimes it's not, right? It's the wrong kind. It's prideful, right? It's not the right kind of pride. And so from that job, I took my first flight lesson. So I'm cleaning airplanes, and I know how far you want to go, but I think it's imperative that I tell this story, especially if there are young people watching this, because all of us have been through our own personal hell to get to where we are, right? And so I'm watching these airplanes for folks who don't necessarily like me, right, or want me around. And then this guy by the name of Tony Sellier, who was a state representative. I didn't know this, right? He came out and was like, hey, who washed my plane? And they were like, well, Deuce washed it. And they said, well, come on, man, let's go flying. I don't know Tony Sellier from anybody. I don't know him from any. I don't know that he's a U.S. rep. I don't know any of this stuff, or a rep from Georgia, right? So I'm like, hey, sir, I'm on the clock. I can't just. And he was like, no, I talked to him. Let's go. So I get in the airplane, start flying with him. Come to find out, he knows my mother and father. I never heard them mention Representative Sellier before, right? Come back down. I'm like, they're probably going to dock my pay. And they were like, nah, you're good. Then there was a black man that had a twin-engine airplane out there by the name of Dr. Luther Vance. And he came out and was like, well, who cleaned up my airplane? And I was like, me. He was like, hey, let's go flying.
Hello.
So I started getting these free flight lessons. So when I started paying for flight lessons, I wasn't starting from like brick one. And, I didn't finish before I graduated from high school. But one of the most fulfilling things in my life, before Tony Sellier passed away from cancer, I was the chief pilot, I think, of the J-Stars fleet. And I was able to fly him on the jet on one of our local missions, right? And so that was like, here's a dude that didn't know me from anything but saw how I worked, even in a job that I didn't like, right? And the other thing is, some of those people that were laughing at me when I first walked in there, like before I left that job, we befriended each other, right? Because sometimes people just kind of react to what they see around them, or they don't know anyone like you. So they go with what they see on TV or whatever, and then like when people find out they have more in common than different, now they have to challenge their thinking, right? So that is literally my origin story when it comes to like how did I get in the airplane? It came from cleaning toilets.
So your hard work broke down barriers that a lot of people would have seen as barriers that would stop them from getting aviation.
Yes,
which goes to show that hard work can destroy almost any barrier that exists.
Correct. Well, another thing is, let other people tell you no, right? They told me no the first time, but I was like, well, let me see how I can get a yes out of this. And sometimes you just got to maneuver your way into the place you want to be. And, I'm not going to lie. There were some moments where I was like, maybe I don't want to fly, right?
No, for sure.
But then, if you keep at it, it turns around.
So how do you deal with that? Because that's something that I have a lot of people ask me, like, I don't really know if this is for me. And sometimes I feel like that's fear talking as opposed to them actually not being able to do it. But they feel like I can't do this, or I don't want to do this.
It's growth, right? Growth is painful. I don't want to use these overused metaphors about butterflies and like like real life is growth. Growth is painful. Change is painful. Everything that I've done that has really benefited me in my life has been difficult. And I've lost people along the way, right? Some people that you think are going to support you, and maybe for some of them it wasn't really like I lost them, but our relationship is definitely different because I'm committed to something. And for them, when something gets hard, it's like, well, let's try something new, which is fine. I don't penalize you for that, but you can't penalize me for being like, nah, I'm gonna work this out. I'm gonna make it work.
Because sometimes you like walk up to a door and knock on it, and you think if you can't get in the door, there's not a window on the side. But I feel like your
Correct.
parents kind of pushed you towards looking for that window.
Oh, my mother and father. My father was born in 1938. He'll be 86 here this summer. My mom will be 80 this June also. And when you grow up in the segregated South in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, right, there's not my folks have told me that they love me, right? I get that part. But let's just say that there are consequences. They taught me consequences. And I think that's something, quite frankly, and I'm trying to, not to get too personal, but even with my own kids, right? I wasn't as strict with them as my parents were with me. And in some ways it was good, but in other ways, like, I know consequences. And my kids are like, oh, well, maybe they're having a bad day. And I'm like, no, they did something wrong and they need to be, there needs to be a consequence for your actions. Right?
But you know what? I mean, in aviation and in the military, when you do things wrong, sometimes the consequence is catastrophic.
Well, like we said in the beginning, the jet does not care if you've had a bad day, a good day. Like you put in an input, and there's a consequence of that input, right? And so, that's part of life, right? And our business is a beautiful business, but it can also be unforgiving, and it takes a lot of discipline, a lot of standardization, right? And it can make us a little rigid sometimes, but everything was written because someone bent up metal or they bled, right? So I don't want to be the reason someone writes a new checklist. Like, oh yeah, this is the deuce portion of the checklist, right? Like, you don't want that reputation, right? So yeah, but that's my origin story. Hope I didn't go too long.
No, that's amazing.
So going from, out there flying in middle Georgia,
yep,
to then being back there flying the J-Stars.
Yeah.
There seems to be that you didn't go straight from there to flying the J-Stars.
Well, so there was a gap. So I went to Florida A&M University as an Army ROTC scholarship cadet. I graduated from there in 96, went to Fort Rucker, and finished Army Flight School as a Black Hawk pilot. Went to Germany, which was probably the best assignment I've ever had while I was in active duty. served in the Balkans, Macedonia, Albania, Kosovo, doing Operation Allied Force, all that stuff. And then I PCSed back to the States, and I went to Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah, part of 3rd Infantry Division. And that's when I fought in the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And at this point, I've got a wife, 2 kids, twin daughters. And I'm like, man, okay, so when I didn't have kids, it was cool to be gone 200 days out the year, right? I had the cat by the tail. And then once you have children, you realize that now I'm responsible for other people. Like, I am responsible for them. And so when I got back from the invasion, we started looking at Air National Guard units. I thought I was going to fly the B-1 because Georgia had the bone, right? And so I go for the interview, and they're like, "Hey, we don't have the B-1 anymore, but we've got J-Stars." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let me see, 15 more months in Iraq or J-Stars?" I'm picking J-Stars, right? And so the rest, as they say, is history. But that was not my plan, though.
Right.
It exceeded my plan, but it was definitely not my plan. I had no clue that I would be the wing commander out at that base when I was 15, 16 years old. It wasn't there.
So I have a question. So when you think about like all the skills that you've acquired, the skills that you've had, a lot of people think that there's certain skill sets that you must have to become an aviator. What do you kind of like think about that? Are there skills that you kind of grew into, or skills that you already were kind of set the foundation of before you even?
Both. Okay. But the main skill set you need to be an aviator is stubbornness. Right, you have to just be stubborn, and not in an obstinate kind of way, but you've got to be about it. Some of the other skills I've had to learn along the way. I was kind of used to consequences. Like, my true story, Mom, don't get mad at me, but like if my mother fought, like if we were sitting down, so it's just my brother and I, right? So there was no segregation of chores. I didn't know there was such thing as a guy's chore or a girl's chore. Like, my brother and I were told to do things, and that's how it went down. And so if my mom or dad was like, "Hey, get up and wash the dishes," like, you need to be moving, right? Because if you weren't, you might get some water thrown on you. Right?
Be on your way.
That may be an example. I just right. So I was raised like that, and when you get in a group dynamic, everyone wasn't raised on like that. So I had to learn, like, hey man, like, bring it down, right? Relax. People will eventually get to whatever the task is, but I had to learn how to play well with others a little bit more, right? And that is something that you're gonna need in aviation. Right? You're going to have to learn how to brief people, because every time you fly, you got to brief. And if you're not used to that, especially for people who aren't into public speaking, that can be intimidating, right? And they're like, "Okay, I got a good plan." It's like, well, go tell other people your plan and let them shoot holes in it. And they're like, no. All right. I don't want to do that.
I remember the murder briefs before deployments, getting up there and you tell, like, here's the plan, and you get up there, and then it's the auditorium full of everybody.
That's right, Machine Gun Kelly. Like, your plan is horrible. Like, who made you mission planning? So those are things I think we all have to grow into, and I think on a diversity thing. I will tell you that as a black officer, and I get asked this a lot, and I've said this many times in other interviews, right? So when you're a black officer or female, or black or female air crew, when you walk into a room, like your credibility is at zero, and you have to build credibility.
Yeah, that's something I say all the time. Like, you have to prove your exceptionalism every time you walk in the room.
Yeah, you're building credibility. With a lot of my white peers, when they walk into the room, they have credibility, and then they lose it or gain it along the way, right? So when people often ask me, well, what's the biggest difference, or what has been this thing that makes it quote unquote difficult, or pick an adjective that people want to give you. I would just tell you at a basic level, and I don't think it's unique to being black. I see it with women all the time, right? Women will come into that, and it's a lot different now. And I know you're thinking it's not different, but I can promise you, if you had started flying in 1997, the briefing room looks a lot different than it did then, right? And so I see it happening with women sometimes. They come into a room, and over the years, that attitude has changed. But I can definitely tell you when I first got in, it wasn't that way. The credibility had to be built versus like, hey, the United States Army or Air Force has deemed you worthy to be here, so we're all going to start this equal level of credibility and either go up or down from there. It was kind of like, well, I don't care what the Army or Air Force said. You need to prove yourself.
It's like you don't get that benefit of the doubt.
Correct.
I think that's another way that I've looked at it is like you don't just get the benefit of the doubt because nobody's perfect, but when you make a mistake, it's like, did they give you the benefit out that you just had a good day when you were good,
right?
Or if something went up and someone's like, nah, that person just had a bad day. That benefit of the doubt can be different depending on how you walking with that credibility.
Yeah. So I think that's really for me. If someone were to ask like, how do you sum up the difference in your experience now? With that being said, and I'm really talking to you because me and KT are old. Right?
Seasoned.
We're seasoned. Is that what y'all calling it? Seasoned. Look, I like being the OG, right? I feel like I'm old. I'm good with it. So I'm really talking to you, right? Yeah. As a young person, because there's some things that KT and I had to figure out along the way because there weren't enough people to tell us what was right or wrong. So now you have enough people, right? And I'm going to tell you that even though you may get that, you have to build credibility, right? All you got to do is keep straight in your mind that you earned where you are. Boom. Like you can't. Yeah. I don't care.
Something people throw around a lot nowadays, like the imposter syndrome. And at conference, they were talking about like you can't have that.
Well, let me tell you something though. In a moment of vulnerability here, I will tell you, and maybe there's a different phrase for it, but in a lot of jobs that I have, what you all call imposter syndrome, I call like doubt or fear. Like, hey, am I ready for this? And it's not a thing where it's like, I don't think I'm capable. It's not the capability thing. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, am I going to react to this person the right way? Like I'm almost like micromanaging situations, overthinking situations in my mind instead of just being myself, being the person. The execution. Yeah, just execute, right? And also, I think though, if you don't have a little intrepidation about every new job you get, something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Like when Mike Tyson said he was scared before every fight, I'm like, Mike Tyson?
That's me every check ride. I'll be in there sweating.
You know what I'm saying?
Don't let your guard down.
Right.
Don't let your guard down.
Yeah, the harbinger of death was nervous before fighting some of these scrubs, right? Like I couldn't believe it. But it's just one of those things where people in aviation, we all kind of have this thing where you don't want to fail. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So this whole imposter syndrome and like I hear people giving it a name so they can write a book about it, right? But I think it's normal to go into a new thing and have some doubts, but just execute, right? Just study and execute, and that'll work all the doubts out, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So you talked about something I thought was really interesting, like when it comes to like diversity, and you said back in '97 it was a particular way. Now it's different. Do you think that? Well, based on what you said, that it has improved in the way that people, the Air Force, and not even to say the Air Force, but in general, how we're growing when it comes to looking at diversity in the field of aviation and more likely other things as well.
Yeah, because we have to remember it's only 2% of black people.
Oh, I'm painfully aware. Yeah, no. So here's it's a multifaceted question, right? Mm-hmm. So is it better, like just on face value? Well, yes. Are we where we need to be? Then no. And I think
still at 2%,
right? It's holding 2%. But here's something that I've learned. So in the Air National Guard, you have to hire and fire your own people. I don't have this recruiting command where I can be like, send me 10 more pilots, right? So I have to be my own HR specialist, right? Because I hired our mutual friend Andrea Lewis, right? And what I've learned over the years is that we are at a deficit at being exposed to aviation. The other barrier is financial. I mean, to be a commercial pilot, if you're doing that out your pocket, that's $100K. The folks that I grew up with in Fort Valley, Georgia, didn't have $100K a year, let alone to spend in aviation, right? And so when people look at this thing and they're like, okay, well, we're only at 2%. Well, you have to look at the thing as a whole, the whole socio-economic position, and be like, okay, well, who has that kind of money? And if they do have that kind of money, are they going to let little Johnny go chase his dream, right, with this extra money we have around? And another thing that people, I think, try to misuse or dirty the word diversity. Like, diversity means just that. It means everybody. Now, this is my part of this is going to be my military hat. I have nothing against the country of China at all, right? But that is our near peer competitor. China is going to have 4.5 times our population by 2030. And they're going to have 15 times more people with PhDs in STEM fields, right? See, they've got a mass of folks they can pick from. Diversity is our secret weapon in the United States. It's our weapon. Our adversaries, through certain apps, which I won't name, like, they see our diversity, they know it's our strength, but they use it against us. And they make people think, oh, well, if you're getting something, that means KT can't get it. And that is not what that means, right? If we want to win this thing, we have to mine for Americans in every pocket of the country, no matter what they look like, whether they're male or female, right? That's what diversity is. But for folks who are narrow in scope, right, they'll just be like, well, diversity means a black person, or diversity means a woman. And that is not it, brother. You're not, you know what I'm saying? You're not picking up what
scope is still small.
You're not picking up what I'm laying down. So if people really want to tackle this, and I've gone through several stages of grief with this myself, like, why aren't there more people that look like me that do this thing? But the older I get, the more I realize that if we don't change our socioeconomic status, because this thing is so difficult, right? If you are poor in America, regardless of race, you probably go to a not so good school. If you go to a not so good school, you probably don't have good test scores. You need some decent test scores if you're going to apply to be a pilot in any of the DoD services, right? So this thing starts way back in your county. But where you and I are, we're like, well, it's only 2% of us out here. Well, when you start pulling that cover back,
look at the layers.
There's so many different layers to this, right? So, for a while I was like, well, there must be something nefarious going on, right? Which is a reason. But the nefarious thing is if folks don't have the money to do it, even if they want to, right? So education is key. Finances are key. On the civilian side, and we work for the same company that's based here in Atlanta. I'll leave it at that. So on the civilian side, when you look at it, there's a pilot shortage. I mean, companies are hiring 200, 150 pilots a month. And our company, I heard one senior captain tell me one time, there were periods where they hired 40 people a year.
Right.
A year, right? But now we're at this deficit, and it's like, okay, how do we fill the ranks of these cockpits? Well, it goes back to my military example. You're going to have to mine for folks, right, in every part of America. That does not exclude white men or white women. Like diversity means everybody. Everybody. So the picture's going to look a little different to some people, right? But in the end, it's going to be a better picture.
And nobody's losing by having more diversity.
No.
There's so many jobs out here to become a pilot that I got a vacancy. Are you motivated?
Can you follow the
There it
rules?
is.
Like, oh, okay, well, come on. I'll give you some training, and we'll see how this goes. So, getting people involved in our business, unfortunately, is a much more complicated thing than just saying, well, there's something nefarious going on, and they're not letting us fly. Because, I mean, you heard my story. If my parents hadn't been college teachers, do you think, I would have been in Fort Valley or close enough to an airfield? Like, there's some factors in here that I have to admit that were out of my control.
That benefited
Me, right? And some folks like to coin that as privilege. I'm like, well, okay, privilege or blessing. Pick your word.
Pick how you use it.
Right. You can pick privilege or you can pick blessing, but in the end, once you get into that position, you still got to work for it.
You still got to fly that plane.
You still got to fly the plane. You still got to study whatever it is, right? So, I mean, I hear people talking, and everyone wants to have a bar fight now, verbal bar fight. But and the Twitter warriors, right?
Man, don't get me started. Don't get me started on that.
Yeah, but it is. Just keep your head up, and recognize your blessings as they come, and work to bring other folks along.
So there are organizations that go out there and mine in those communities where they wouldn't necessarily know about aviation. Yeah. So say that there is somebody out there who has an inkling that they want to be in aviation.
Okay.
How do they start segueing into this career without like any financial backing? Or are there any organizations or kind of...
And not even just kids, but older people
that's
too.
True. Because
we focus a lot on youth because we know that's where we think we should start.
Yeah.
But we also get the question from 30-year-olds.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well, and to your point, there's a person at my job that's a high-ranking officer who's in his 50s that just got his CFII. Like he is like, hey, I'm going to be an airline pilot, and I encourage him as much as I can. Like, hey, man, I don't know. They may hire you for a year by the time you get done, right? But I'm like, whatever you do, don't stop. I'm not the king of no, right? I'm the yes guy. But what I would do to answer your question is to tell you that there are resources out there that KT and I didn't have, right? I had to go to the bookstore and to the library and physically get a thing to read about aviation or steps to take. You have a supercomputer in your hand. Most people have a phone. All the information, I shouldn't say all, a lot of the information that you need is in that phone, right? How do I get started to become a pilot? What's the nearest FBO near me, or not even a pilot, right? Airfield manager or a mechanic. You've got to, we're in the age of self-help now. I remember when I, grew up, when KT and I were young, right. We didn't have automated checkout lines in the grocery store, right? You had people there, right? Now I feel like I work at Publix, right? Like I got, yeah, right, exactly. Like, hey,
I'm just in the line. I'm just gonna do it myself.
Right, but we're in that age of self-help now, right? Like, I mean, bank tellers. When my father got paid, he had to go to the bank and deposit his check before they closed on Friday. Now you're just like,
Doop.
So you have to help yourself.
Convenience.
That's
a lot
right.
of it, aviation is not always convenient.
It's not.
It's not convenient in any way, shape, or form.
No.
Ain't nothing convenient about flying an airplane.
No, it's not.
And with all the automation, people Google a lot of stuff. They can look at a lot of stuff. But I tell you and you probably both agree with me, even with the Google searches, the YouTube videos, the Instagram reels that give you motivation, there's still no substitute for actually talking with people about your situation and getting mentored and guided through the process.
I feel like a lot of people don't come from your angle, like telling the hardship. They just make it look like this glamorous picture, like aviation. Oh my gosh,
It's so easy.
Hey,
so easy.
well,
I just got here in a blink of an eye.
Not-
Get your job today.
now you,
Right, true story.
you about to make me the grouchy old man now, right? Because and to your point though, whether you're on Snapgram or InstaChat or Facebook or whatever you kids are using, right? And that's the danger of that, right? People see these things and it's like the 30 seconds of your best life. And it's like, okay, well that 30 seconds actually took about 17 years to happen. And so making sure that people understand that, you know, it's a lot of hard work. It's not just for the likes or the mentions. Like, you know, there's work that goes behind it. And that's difficult. Yeah, that's difficult.
It's difficult to convey that too. That is,
Right.
I think that is the most difficult thing to convey. That I make it look good on Instagram. I'm just saying, you know, I make it look real good.
I watch your feed. I'm like, I'm slipping.
What?
Like my life is not like that. Is that what I look like when I walk down the jetway? Like, yeah, right.
And it's like I try to tell people. I said, man, that is a quick 30 seconds. Even though but it takes so long to get there. But people don't like seeing. People don't like to see the hard work sometimes. And as soon as you tell them everything it is, there's some people like, no, that's too hard. It's like, well, I'm not here to convince you to be a pilot.
I'm just gonna keep it real.
So I'm not doing the interview, but I got a question for y'all on this to both of your points. So you've had plenty of people come up to you and say, how do I do this thing, right? And I'm sure you have helped many people, right? Of those people that you've helped, how many have actually kind of seen it through?
I can't even name it. And that's another thing. Like with a lot of my mentors, they'll look at me and they'll be like, you actually did it. And I'm like, I actually did it. Wait.
I'll tell you, because people will say, oh, what do I need to do? I said, call me after you after you go on your discovery flight.
There you go.
Oh, what should I say? I said, until you go take the first couple steps,
right.
we can't have any more conversations.
That's right.
Because you have this, oh, I could have been nope. Do the steps and then we'll talk. And
self-help.
Right.
You got to be able to be willing to do work, because people ask all the time, oh, what do I need?
How do I start?
It's like when people say, oh, give me a good diet routine to work out.
Right.
Like, they want you to write it all out for them.
Like,
I'm like, you can get a pen and paper and write down what I'm telling you.
Well,
Take the first
I'm
steps.
gonna give you all some personal advice that old crusty General Crumbly has learned over the years. Right, I have learned to, and it was difficult for me because I wanted to help everybody, but I have learned to help people that help themselves. It'll save you a lot of energy. All right, and I'm looking at you because you the youngest one in here. Me and KT, you know, he's younger than me, but I'm gonna talk about him. Like we the same age, right? That's right, yeah. But people will meet you at different points in their lives, right? But when the thing that's universal is when they're ready, they will. When they are ready, you can't want it for them. And I found myself trying to help people because I wanted it for them
more than they wanted
it, right? So, you know, and they'll be like, well, you know, you're not helping me. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like, I didn't have anybody.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So help the folks that want to be helped.
And that's the thing, like, when you're so passionate about aviation, it's nothing for you to want to help somebody. Like, you want to help, of course.
Yeah,
like,
because you're passionate. Yeah.
Because I think I even told you, I said, when you come instructor, don't instruct for free.
Yes.
And I didn't say that because I don't think you should help people, but I'm like, people gotta have a dog in the fight.
Yeah.
They gotta have a dog in the fight. And I guarantee you, though, people who really want it, down the road, they come back to you because it's a long journey for aviation. And I think people realize it's like, it takes a long time.
Yes.
Very long time.
And I feel like with our dynamic, it's like I'll come to you and ask you for advice, but I already kind of have like a map out of what I already think.
You've researched it.
Yeah.
Self-help. That's what I'm talking about. And so to that.
They're going to still push you in the right direction, but it's like, I'm not going to spoon feed you now.
Well, people will let you do it. That's what I'm telling you. That's
they sure will.
Trust me, I got some scar tissue. Like, just so, you know, help the folks that are helping themselves, you know, help them.
No, definitely. Okay, so I want to get into like Civil Air Patrol.
Okay.
Yes, so I'm personally a senior member. I'm a first.
Oh, okay.
I'm a first lieutenant. Wait, is it a first lieutenant? We gotta pause that because I want to make sure I'm saying this right.
What color is the bar that you got? That you got on?
I didn't have money to get the uniform yet.
right, yeah.
It's hard out here. It's hard.
It is very hard. So you're in the chapter here in Georgia?
Yes, the Gwinnett Squadron. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's the largest squadron, isn't it? Yeah, okay.
Just say you're a lieutenant, because then that covers with your first.
Yeah, it'll cover the whole thing.
All right.
Yes. So I've been in it, but I didn't really know how much it can actually assist you in helping you.
Yes. So in the Air Force and the Air National Guard in particular, we have a special relationship with the Civil Air Patrol. And they hold some of their meetings / conventions, part of them on Dobbins Air Reserve Base, right? And I think they just switched out the regional commander.
I think so too.
Right. So it's a great auxiliary of the United States Air Force, and a lot of people don't know that. It costs about $150 an hour to fly a Cessna 172, right? So let's just say you got to do some training if you fly a fighter or if you flew an aircraft like us, an ISR aircraft, right? So you can either have another military aircraft help you with that training at $15,000 a flight hour, or you can call the Civil Air Patrol and be like, hey man, can you fly around in a circle? I want to see if I can, get a good radar read in case I have to intercept, a rogue flyer for $150 an hour.
Taxpayer dollars saved. So Civil Air Patrol or the government will pay them, which gives the Civil Air Patrol missions to go do.
Correct. So search and rescue, I'm sure you're familiar with that. And so when you're in the Guard, if you have an ISR asset or some kind of EO optical lens where you can look at stuff, when hurricanes or other natural disasters happen, they always come to the Guard and they're like, hey, can you go look for my little dog, Mutt, right? And we're like, okay, we would like to, but there's a thing called intel oversight. I cannot use that piece of EO optical equipment over civilian areas because it can be deemed as spying, right? And we don't spy on our own citizens. But the Civil Air Patrol can go out there with a FLIR ball on their aircraft and they can look for somebody's lost dog. But what we really use them for is hurricanes, tornadoes, right? So we can do that kind of thing in the military, but it takes a letter basically from the Secretary of Defense saying, okay, they are not spying on Americans. They are looking to, find who's alive or X, Y, and Z. So that's another great thing about the Civil Air Patrol, where they don't have to work through the red tape that we have to work through.
And so as a person who volunteers and is part of Civil Air Patrol, they get to gain that experience of doing that type of stuff at little to no cost to them because they're not paying for the flight hours. The Air Force is paying for those flight hours.
That's right.
And you get some really good experience that you really can't get anywhere else in like general aviation.
Yes, for sure.
So,
it kind of gives you like the best of both worlds.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And one of the things that I think should be emphasized is like the scanner, the observer, and what's the last one?
Scanner, observers.
In the aerial survey?
Pilot?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so those are like the 3 steps before you get to actually becoming a pilot. I feel like this kind of plays back into your story where, you became a janitor. So just because you can't get a pilot slot today, you could still become a scanner, still be in the
Of course. And don't sell me short. I was a janitor, plane washer, right, you list all my jobs. I was just,
Oh, for sure.
I think the other thing that people don't realize is you can be an adult in Civil Air Patrol. A lot of people think,
it's just for kids.
Yeah. Civil Air Patrol is adults who do it. So even people who are just trying to get into aviation, trying to learn it, Civil Air Patrol is another opportunity for people to also, another way for people to serve, and help out if they, maybe have a reason they can't go to the Air Force. It's another way.
Yes, and Civil Air Patrol has like a bucket of money for like certain amount of O flights for the students. I know it's specifically for the youth. But that's a way for you to kind of get into aviation, even see if you like it without even costing you any money.
So join the Civil Air Patrol, people. Like that's what she's saying. Yeah, ultimately, Or give a shot. Go to your local chapter. Go to the self-help phone, right? And then put Civil Air Patrol nearest detachment near me, and go check it out.
Because when I tell you I had to email so many different people to get to pointed to the right direction to actually meet my actual commander, but if I would have never emailed this person who told me this is the new person, then I would never.
Yeah, but that was there was some initiative there.
Yes.
Yeah. I got you.
You got to.
That's right.
There it is.
What would you say a person should do if they're kind of in between going the civilian route or the military route?
That is an excellent question. To be quite honest with you, and I don't mean to sound hokey, but do what you love, right? Like. Deep down, you know whether or not you're a Lakers fan or a Clippers fan, right? You know which LA team you like the best, right? So you got to kind of figure out like, okay, when I was a little kid, like what kind of pictures were on my wall? Were there pictures of 747s or were there pictures of F-22s, right? Maybe your answer lies there, right? Yeah. And then, but you also need to investigate because not that being a civilian or a commercial airline pilot doesn't have sacrifice, because the name of the job should be airline pilot / you're going to sacrifice a lot of your personal life, right? but it's the same thing in the military too, except we have the one critical exception where we take an oath to the Constitution of the United States, and we are willing to pay the ultimate price for our country, right, and our freedom. So that is a very highlighted line. So you just have to decide, like, okay, is that something I'm willing to do? And then if it's not, then pick the other side.
You know, there's people say, oh, well, maybe I'll become a pilot in the Air Force first, then as a way to become a commercial pilot. It's like, don't go to the military and be an airline pilot, to be a pilot in the military if you have no desire to be a pilot in the military.
Correct.
It ain't a shortcut to nowhere.
Right.
You got to want to do that or have a desire or interest that's something you want to do. Don't waste your time.
Yeah.
It's too hard.
There's one thing I will say, though, and it goes back to money. If you let's just say the person has a desire, period. Like, we're not going to question their desire. The military is an excellent route for someone that has that desire, because you're going to get 4 years of flight training in a year. We typically call it the best, worst year of our lives, right? You're going to be trained by, in my opinion, the best pilots in the world. Be held to the highest standards in the world, and you're going to be asked to do some amazing things in an aircraft that you would never get to do in the civilian world. For a kid that grew up in the country, I was semi-feral growing up, right, to be quite honest with you. So the military just always kind of appealed to me. So does commercial aviation. So if that desire is the same, the military is not a bad route for you.
Yeah.
Not a bad route for you.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a good perspective.
And also,
I'll be recruiting you after this podcast.
and I think another piece that people I wish I knew about this like earlier is that the reserve and the National Guard for flying in the military, like that is like the gem that no one told me about till. Too late. Right. Because you have the opportunity to kind of do both. You know, if you can have the best of both worlds, do the military flying and also be an airline pilot kind of at the same time. You know, there's some balance with that, but it's a really good option.
It's not a bad life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
To enlist or to not enlist? That is the question. I want to talk about being an officer.
Yeah.
In the pilot route, and then enlisting in the pilot route, because I feel like there's not really.
I'm going to tell you 100%. If you want to be a pilot, do not enlist. However, I do know lots of pilots that were enlisted beforehand, but I can speak from my path, right? And I know KT is going to speak to his. I went to school. I was a ROTC scholarship cadet. And even when I was at school, people were like, "Hey, man, they're probably not going to give you a shot unless you prove yourself first. You need to enlist." And I was like, "Nah, I heard there's a test I got to take." Right. And I'm proving myself by going to class and keeping my GPA. Like I'm, in my mind, I was like, I'm doing those steps already. I just need to take whatever this test is, and then leave me alone about it. And for some people, they don't get the aviation bug until they're already enlisted, and they're like, these airplanes are cool. Because they don't know. They've never been exposed to it, right? And so they're like, man, how do I do that? I didn't even know about this thing. So either way, there's a path for you. But if you're 18 years old and you come to me, I'm going to tell you to go to a 4-year institution, get your college degree, and either get an ROTC or go to OTS and become a pilot that way.
OTS?
I'm sorry, Officer Training School, OCS, Officer Candidate School, right? So,
because you can only become a pilot once you have a degree.
In the military.
In the military,
okay. you need a 4-year college degree.
Okay.
To become a pilot.
Okay.
For Kate, well, I'll let you tell your story, KT, because I know you're. I'll let KT tell the story.
So I would agree, if you already know that you want to do that and you have the means to go to school and you have the means, there's no reason to be enlisted in order to be a pilot. I was enlisted because that was a situation that kind of worked, and I didn't really understand how to get there, and I didn't have necessarily the way to get there. I enlisted, and then
you were like, oh, these planes are cool.
Well, I knew that before,
Oh, okay.
but I didn't know how to get there. And so while I was enlisted, I found a way to get an ROTC scholarship and then go do it, because I knew that's how you, because ultimately that's how you get there in the military, is to get that degree in order to fly in the military.
And I see you guys both got scholarships. Was it like the same thing where you had to write an essay, or like how did it kind of go?
Listen, you know how many years ago that was? I may have sold fruit by the highway to get that scholarship. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I had to write an essay. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I called all of the ROTCs that I would have went to ask them, what do I got to do to be part of ROTC? Because I was listed at the time.
Okay. Oh, yeah. There you go.
I called because I said, I got to figure this
Hustle.
out.
Yeah.
I just said, let me call them and see what I got to do.
Yeah.
And I got to, when I called University of Texas San Antonio, they said, well, if you join ROTC, since this is a Hispanic Service Institute and you qualify, you get a scholarship. I said, hold up. So all I got to do is sign up. They're like, well, as long as you pass PT test, you got a medical. I said, well, I'm on active duty now, so I got to pass a PT score, and I got a good medical. And they're like, well, once you come here, as long as you have good grades and you don't suck, you get a scholarship.
Yeah.
So, but I only knew that it wasn't like advertised everywhere. I had actually found that, by the grace of God and by knocking on doors, just like hustling, and I found, and I was like, I could afford free.
Yeah.
I could afford a free.
Yeah, there you go. Free 99, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Ain't nothing better than that. That's amazing.
Yeah, hey, even for that essay thing you were talking about, though, because you jogged my memory, because my kids are young and they're in that college age. If you're not a good writer, there are places that you can go that will help you write your essay, right? And whatever you do, people, please don't do Chat GPT, because
Don't get me started.
right, the gig is up right now. They've got, just like you can run something for a while when it's new, but then now they have software that can kind of tell, like, there's 80%.
Nobody can tell your story better than you.
Exactly. So there are places that can help folks if they need help with their essays.
And one thing that I do, I save all my essays. So like every essay for any scholarship I've ever done, I'll save it, and when I revise it for the next one, I'll save that one, just so I could already have the template. And I'm just changing or revising.
Saves you time, and it's not plagiarism when it comes from you.
Not even just saving me time, but it's a way for me to keep my own checkpoints.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, which is the best thing. Hold yourself accountable.
See.
Yes.
Learning from the youth. Look, who
That
knew?
Too.
Yeah.
That too. Keep it spunky. Well, I'm so glad we got to have this conversation. I learned a lot. Did you learn a lot?
I did.
You already probably knew it.
I learn every time I'm around KT.
I think though, having these conversations, I think it affirms everybody has a story. Nobody started here. You didn't just join the Air Force with two stars on your shoulder.
No, not at all.
I started from the bottom.
Yeah, that's right.
Everybody has a journey, a story, and it ain't easy for nobody.
It's not.
Yeah. Well, I tell people, KT, sometimes I'm like, when I it happened so fast. I'm like, yeah, it took me 30 years to be an overnight success. Right? Like, but okay, it happened fast. Yeah. I want to see you put in the 3 decades worth of work.
Right.
But for the most part, people are like, 2 thumbs up. But you remember that when I'm TDY and I look up in the front of that cockpit, I'm gonna be like, look who it is.
I'm gonna be asking to ride in your jump seat one day to give
you
me
sure
one.
will. Check low for me. It's okay.
Hey, when are we gonna get him with the correct airline?
We're not gonna have a conversation.
Not gonna do. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Offline. Okay. All right. Okay.
Because it was important. You brought up how you being the first commander of the 116th.
Yeah.
And you were like, you never looked at the pictures on the wall.
I didn't pay him any attention.
You didn't pay him any mind, right?
Yeah.
When I was at Robbins, I remember I did look at the wall, and I remember looking at the wall and not seeing anybody that looked like me.
That's because he pays attention.
Because I was trying to look. I was like, how is it? How do I get to see myself here, right? And so it was. So even though you weren't paying attention to it because you're just working and trying to get there,
right?
I just need you to know how important it was, even
Oh, yeah.
though I wasn't even at J-Stars when your when your picture got put up there. That's important to me, even though I didn't get to see it. Somebody got to see it.
Well, to your point, when I was in the Army, my first duty station in Giebelstadt, and it was a good experience. But I remember walking in there and looking, so every government building, there's a chain of command, right? So just for the folks who aren't like, what are y'all talking about pictures on the wall for, right? So you go into a government or a military building, your chain of command, including the president's on the wall, right? So it starts from, if you're in the Army, company commander, if, flight commander, if you're in the Air Force, so on and so forth. And I remember looking at the pictures, and I was like, there's no one in the history of this aviation company that looks like me on this wall. And it was kind of intimidating, right? And I was like, okay, well, are they going to accept me? Like, you start to have these doubts that have nothing to do with your capability, but everything to do with your mindset, right? And someone had brought this up to me about the wing portraits, that they call them. And what I told him was, I wish I had thought of this when I was a young helicopter pilot and I saw those pictures up there and I didn't see anybody that looked like me, because what you should be telling yourself is, well, I can be that change. I can be the person that goes up on the wall, right? You have to always kind of focus your mind in a positive
motivation
direction, right? Because and I'm not proselytizing, because we're not supposed to, right? So I'm not proselytizing. All right, which means I'm not. I'm not advocating religion or a specific religion. That's a precursor for what I'm about to say, because I listen to a lot of sports podcasts and sometimes religious podcasts and a lot of historical podcasts. But Mike Tyson said something. And if you don't know anything about Mike Tyson, he's had a varied life, but he's kind of made his way around. And you got to always remember this, like, when you're favored, this is paraphrasing Mike, when you're favored by God, you're favored by the devil too. Right? So when you look at those pictures up there and you're like, man, that's never going to happen for me. See, that's the wrong person talking to you. Right? It's kind of you gotta always err towards the light, right? Like when you see those things, you always have to be like, well,
rational mindset.
Yeah, you gotta be like, well, maybe that didn't happen before, but I can be that. Yes. I can be that.
Add that it didn't happen yet.
Right. So you always, that there's always this battle for your mind and your soul. And just by you sitting here in the seat, that already tells me that, somebody likes you, but you're liked by both sides. So you're going to have to constantly remind yourself that, like, okay, I need to move towards the light at all times, and it's difficult, but you got to do it.
So you being in a leadership position, I know a lot of people that usually turn away from those leadership positions. So I feel like it's important for us to have people who represent in leadership roles. One thing that really struck me when we started this conversation was that fact that you hired Andrea Coleman.
Yeah.
So you actually reached back and brought people up with you. Can you just speak to that? Yeah.
So Andrea definitely falls into the self-help category, right? She was a reservist at Scott Air Force Base in Illinois, right? So,
whoa,
and
wait,
that's right, in Illinois, and she was also a flight attendant for a major airline that's based in Atlanta. I think that we both know well, right? Right. So she was a busy person, and she had a life event, and she started taking flight lessons, and then she was like, you know what? I think I want to fly. And she knew what the prerequisites were, and she came to us. She started drilling with us. She had to get permission to drill with us.
So it's weekend duty with their unit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
and so thank you, KT.
Oh,
my bad.
Got it. Education.
That's right. So long story short, when she applied the first time, there was some really like stiff competition, right? And there were folks like with 1,500 flight hours. I mean, it was. So I said, "Hey, Andrea, listen to me. I want you to come back next year, no, a whole year. I want you to come back next year. I want you to change or do these things, and then I want you to reapply." She would come back maybe every third month or so for drill for weekend duty. But each time she came back, she was like, "Hey, that first thing you asked me to do, I did it. Second thing you asked me to do,
She
I
was
did
checking
it."
in.
She was checking in. About this time, I become the squadron commander, and we have the hiring board, and she was picked as an alternate, right? As an alternate, and I was kind of disappointed, but I was like, it's a board, right? And unless I have some overwhelming evidence of why she should be the primary, you go with the board. But I'm like, alternate, man, that's like a good start. Like, don't give up. Well, wouldn't you know, the primary had a medical condition, and the primary couldn't go. So I called Andrea and was like, "Hey, guess what? You're number one now." Yeah. Kind of like Maverick and Top Gun, but different.
Yeah.
Right?
That's amazing.
Right. But there, and Andrea will tell you, there were some people that were very resistant to Andrea joining the unit, and I'll put it to you like this: there were some times I had to use some very colorful language with folks when they would make unnecessary remarks about Andrea, right? Because I was like, "I'm not having it. I am not having it."
Wow.
If you're not going to talk about
This
candidate,
is in rooms that she's not in.
of course, right? So if you're not going to talk about candidate X that way, you're not going to talk about candidate Y that way, right? Like the integrity has to be maintained, right? So Andrea went out there. She did her thing. I'm gonna pause here because they may want to edit this out, and then you need to get Andrea's permission. But I'm gonna tell you something. You talk about perseverance. So Andrea goes to flight school, and in the beginning, it wasn't working for her that well. And she's told this story millions of times, right? And she's calling me, and she's like, I'm checking in with her, and she's like, "I don't know. I think I want to phone it in. This is just not, like, it's too hard. It's too." And I said, "Andrea, I usually don't get into folks' personal lives and marriage and all this kind of stuff. But let me tell you something. You need to stick this out, because if you don't, you're going to resent other folks in your lives because you're like, well, I need to be this for them. I need to be that for them. Like, you just need to suck this year up and do it. Don't be the queen of resentment out here, because it's all going to crash anyway. If you do this, you're going to feel fulfilled, and you'd be amazed at how well you treat other people when you're fulfilled." And she was like, "Nope, sir, I'm done." I had purchased Andrea this name tag with her name on it with pilot wings already. And so I took a picture of it, and I sent it to her. And I said, "Well, I wanted to be the first person to put these on your chest, but, And I debated sending it to her because I was like, I don't want her to think I'm rubbing it in or whatever. But there was like somebody talking to me, right? Like, "No, you probably need to send that to her." 2 weeks later, she's like, "Back in the game, coach." And I'm like, "What?" Because I was waiting for her to come back, and I'm like, "What's going on?" Like, and so she tells me, she's like, "I figured out that plane has to do what I tell it to do. Like, it's military aircraft, right? So, not saying that flying a Cessna is easy, but flying a military, like, it's a high-powered aircraft. And you have to put it in the position that you want it in. It's not going to ease its way there. Like, you have to make it. There's a certain amount of aggression that has to be present, right? So she just had to find that lioness in her, right, and get aggressive about it. But I didn't know about that name tag story until the year before last when we were at Charleston for the Tuskegee Airmen fly-in, and she tells people this story, and I'm not like an overly emotional guy. Remember, I was like, "Damn, girl, you about to make me like," you know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't even cry when my kids were born, but I didn't. You, as a leader, you never know No one ever comes up to you and says, hey, you did a great thing for me. It changed my life, X, Y, and Z. You just, leadership is kind of cold. You just out here. Right? And you're making decisions, and you hope the decisions that you make have a positive effect on people. So to get that kind of feedback from a person that I was like,
just a year ago.
Yeah, and that she went to UPT in 15. Well, I forget when she went. 15, whatever it was, right?
Years ago.
So years ago, and I was like, hey, don't hold out on the old man like that. I need feedback too. I need to know if I'm doing something right or wrong. But I have the utmost admiration for Andrea, and she's a first, right? She is the first Black female to be a pilot in the Georgia Air National Guard, right?
Commander.
Aircraft commander.
She's the aircraft commander, and she has been on several combat missions and combat support missions, right? And now we have Teresa Washington is now in Savannah at the C-130 unit, right? But it's just one of those things when you see somebody, it's like, oh, I can do that. And hers came from her maintenance commander. I think it was Poulos. I think that was her commander at the time, and he saw how hard she was working, and he was like, "Hey, you ever thought about being a pilot?" And
you never know who's looking.
You never. That's that work thing, right? You never know. And Andrea had already done it, so in her mind, she was like, "Well, there's somebody that looks like me that can do this thing." And then this guy,
a picture on the wall.
yeah, and then this guy's asking me like, "Hey, have you ever, and he has hundreds of people under him, but he noticed."
That she was working.
That he noticed something about her. Yeah. And sent off to flight school. So you never know. So that's that story.
That's amazing.
Get Andrea's permission. Don't have Andrea blowing me up, being like, "Hey, Deuce, I didn't tell you." Telling my business. Right. Yeah. But yeah, she's a good egg.
That's amazing.
She's a good egg. Yeah.
It's so good to see like you in leadership and like how it's been so pivotal, not only for your journey but for other people's journey.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you.
No,
for continuing
absolutely.
to pave the way for people like me.
And me.
I'm gonna get out of that.
But the Tuskegee Airmen paid it for all of us, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to be the caretaker, right, and pay it forward, and then it'll be y'all's turn. But and the thing that I just want to emphasize, folks just need a shot.
That's it.
Like no one's asking for a leg up, no one's asking for a special favor, none of that. Like people just and I think, with this how people feel now and all this rhetoric that's out here and the Twitter thumb warriors, like there's a gross misunderstanding of what folks are actually looking for, and it's like, hey man, I did these prerequisites, I did this thing, I'm just looking for flat hard surface to run this race on.
Right.
To go up or down.
That's
it.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it. No favors.
Yes. I'm gonna get it done. This is amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I appreciate y'all hanging with us.
Yep.
Most definitely.
I got to hit 285.
Yeah.
Ooh, you already know how that traffic's gonna be.
So definitely.
Yes.
We appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, for sure. Thank
And
you so much.
appreciate
Thanks for
y'all
having
for
me.
tuning in.
Yes.